I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about TPUSA, YWLS. Yes, I'll tell you what all that is. It is really cool. Turning Point USA. Liz Cheney and America's Civil War. Luntz and McCarthy are roommates, and it does matter. W and Zuckerberg collude, and ACWT greatness upcoming. And of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
And hello again, and welcome to America Can We Talk, and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. I sent to Matt, the very wonderful producer, a couple of things I'm going to ask him to put up in just a moment. The short story is that Turning Point USA, TPUSA, which was the first half of this segment, is called TPUSA, and the other four letters stand for Young Women's Leadership Summit. I wanted to tell you in today's First Five about a really exciting opportunity, and this is in Dallas. This is sponsored by Turning Point USA, which is the Charlie Kirk organization, just an inspired, fabulous organization designed to inspire essentially conservative values in young people, including college students, very, very active in college and with young people. And the Turning Point USA is actually hosting in Dallas this summer the Young Women's Leadership Summit. So I sent Matt the wonderful their flyer, so I asked him to put that up. It's a pink flyer. Very fitting. These are their confirmed speakers. And so I'm urging you to just think about the idea. All these ladies will be in one place. It's June 10th through 13th. So this summer in Dallas, June 10th through 13th, they have these confirmed speakers. I think a few more asks are out. And the main reason especially, and I want to keep that up there while we're talking about this, this organization, Turning Point USA, is, as we've been saying, as I mentioned, designed to inspire young people to embrace conservative ideas. And right here in Dallas, one of the Republican women's clubs that is just a real mover and shaker kind of club, the Park Cities Republican Women, they are offering scholarships so that if you know a young woman anywhere in America who would like to come to this conference, she can apply for a scholarship, whether it's you who are listening or someone you know. This is an incredible lineup of speakers at their summit, June 10th through 13th. This is an all-expense-paid scholarship to attend. And this is for conservative young women, the ages of 16 to 26 from all 50 states. You see across the bottom of the screen, it has the website to go to. I'll have this in the end, the why it matters too, because it's a little bit lengthy, but the club is parkcitiesrepublicanwomen.com, and then you have to use that / Missy Shorey scholarship. I really urge you to think about young people who might want to come. You'll just have them leaving this event feeling like, wow, I know what conservatism is. I know young women who will speak up for it. I've heard the leaders. They'll be more inspired not just to vote conservatively, but to be conservative activists. I urge you to tell your friends to please consider, and you, if you're in the age group or someone else you know, get inspired, come to this summit and apply for a scholarship. And that, my very fine friends, is my very short First Five today. So today on the show, I want to hit this idea. I call this Liz Cheney and America's Civil War. I really want to talk about what is going on in America. Liz Cheney is a part of it. She is, as you likely know, a member of Congress from Wyoming. In fact, she's the only member of Congress in Wyoming because the seats in the U.S. House of Representatives are designed by the Constitution to attempt to represent equal numbers of people. And so Wyoming, not a heavily populous state, has one member of Congress, Liz Cheney. She has distinguished herself in many ways, some good, some not good. But right now, there's kind of a battle brewing inside the GOP about whether or not to try to push her out of her leadership position. She's not just a member of Congress, she's in a leadership role. So she's recognized by the media and by certain followers of the Republican Party as a leading spokesperson, as someone who was chosen by her peers in Congress to represent the Republican values in the leadership of the House Republican caucus. And the problem is she voted to impeach President Trump. Not the first time, but the second time. The first impeachment, which was over his completely innocuous conversation with his counterpart in Ukraine, which was ridiculous. But that was the first impeachment in which she gave some pretty pointed comments in that hearing, or when they got to the end of the hearing and they were leading up to the vote. She had the floor and got to make some statements on the House floor, which I'm going to play for you in a moment. And then a year later, pretty much almost exactly a year later, she voted to impeach President Trump over the events of January 6th. So I want to first ask Matt the Wonderful to play the clip of Liz Cheney and her remarks in the U.S. House with respect to the first impeachment effort.
Here, Madam Speaker, our Democratic colleagues have been working to remove this president since the day he was elected, searching for an offense on which they could impeach. Failing to find one, Madam Speaker, they have decided to assume one. Rather than attempting to enforce their subpoenas in court, they have also decided to declare it a high crime and misdemeanor when the President of the United States asserts his constitutional privileges. Passage of these articles of impeachment may permanently damage our republic. From this day forward, a hyper-partisan, bare majority can cite this precedent to try to remove a future commander-in-chief.
I'm telling you, people, that's when she got it. That's when she understood what the Democrats were doing. She understood that that impeachment effort of President Trump over the whole conversation with his counterpart in the Ukraine, she got it at that point, that the Democrats were simply trying to get rid of Trump, and it had nothing really to do with Trump's wrongdoing. It was a stunt. It was a manipulation. It was a contortion. It was a disdainful misuse of the constitutional power to impeach. She got it then. Fast forward a year later, the January 6th events occurred in the Capitol, and she voted to impeach. So right now, the question before the House leadership, the Republican leadership is, and this is Kevin McCarthy, essentially, the House minority leader, he's got to decide, not he's individually solely, but he, along with others in power, need to decide whether to remove her from her position as and I've forgotten the title of her position. It's like she's second or third in charge of the House caucus. But what I want to get at is this. I called this segment the kind of war in America, and I really mean that word. And I know that word has overtones that are violent. I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about the silent but profound ideological civil war happening in America. I'm talking about the idea that the reason the Democrats moved to impeach Trump a year ago, in January 2020, and again in January 2021, are exactly the same reasons. Exactly the same. It had nothing to do with anything President Trump did or said. All it had to do with is that President Trump stood up in the campaign he ran and in the presidency of his first term. He stood up for America the noble, America the free, America the great, America the strong. He stood up for retaining the founding liberties of America. He stood up for the idea of America as a sovereign nation, worthy of having secured borders and a strong military and a free market economy. That's what he stood up for. And this is what drove the leftists out of their minds. The left may not have liked Trump's tweets. They may not like his hairstyle. They may not like, Orange Man, whatever they think. But the reason, the level of deep outrage the left feels toward former President Trump and felt when they pushed the first impeachment and the next impeachment was because Trump was opening the eyes of millions of American people to see how radically un-American the American left had become. The American left does not support secure borders. The American left does not even want borders. The American left is allowing our southern border to become pretty much a magical, invisible line that anyone can cross. The American left did not like the rejuvenation of the spirit of America, the notion of bringing back strongly American free markets and free enterprise, and the idea of bringing jobs home to America. All of this was destroying the Democrats' long-range plan to weaken America, to weaken our sovereignty, our very place in the world stage, to weaken the economy and weaken the strength and will of the American people. So here we stand in 2021, and at this moment, Liz Cheney survived the first effort to remove her from her leadership position, but right now Kevin McCarthy and his other leaders have a decision to make. Is Liz Cheney so out of step with what America is supposed to be, so out of step with what the voters and the GOP base want, that she simply must go? Does her presence remaining in the leadership of the House hurt the Republicans? And Kevin McCarthy has already figured out that it does. He already knows this. So he's trying to decide how to handle this. And I want to hit another point too. This is not about relitigating the relitigating the November 2020 elections. Excuse me. This is not about relitigating the November 2020 elections. It is about pointing out that when you had the November 2020 elections happen and many people doubting the outcome, many people raising questions, there was a reason the left pushed so hard to get Trump out of office. And part of what people see is the mission of the left to remove him was so strong, they would have backed, enabled, or at least turned a blind eye toward what occurred. So Liz Cheney did not, in the year between when she stood on the House floor and told the Democrats, this is outrageous, it's a misuse of the impeachment process, and a year later voted for impeachment, she talked about in the comments at the time and her comments since that time, she's talked about the idea that it's time for people to move on from the 2020 elections. It's time to move on from what occurred in 2020. And many people say, yeah, okay. My beef, my point, my determination is that what we cannot move on from is the Trump agenda. We cannot move on from the Trump agenda. We cannot move on from strong borders, renewed strong military, a renewed commitment to free markets, a renewed commitment to reducing the stranglehold of federal government regulation over businesses in this country. We have to hold on to the very right, the very noble, the very completely parallel with the founding ideas of America, Trump agenda. Fine, Trump's out. We know what happened. Everyone's got their opinions. And we may never know all that happened. But what Trump brought out was a renewing of the idea of America, the America first, America the free, America the strong. And the Republican Party knows that they've got to hold on to that agenda. They want, really, to just move forward and pretend Trump didn't exist. What Liz Cheney has been pushing them on saying is, this is really, really terrible because Trump shouldn't have kept talking about the election, and Trump's a bad guy, and Trump, to some degree, caused the January 6th riots. The correct position for Liz Cheney and the House Republicans is that we, the Republican Party, the conservatives in Washington, are deeply committed to the Trump agenda. We are going to have a secure border again. We're going to have a strong national defense. We're going to have low taxes and limited government. We're going to get government out of people's lives. We're going to push the many, many issues back to the states where they belong to start with. We're going to continue to drain the swamp. The Republicans need to stand up for the Trump agenda. Forget about the nitpicking of the details of what happened in in the November 2020 elections. The idea that the Republican Party has got to stand with the Trump agenda is occurring to more and more people in Washington. They simply, and this is part of what Trump has been saying, and part of what his followers are saying, you know what? We want the Trump agenda. We want all these right things. And this is why it is so, at the very best explanation, clueless what Liz Cheney did to vote for his impeachment. Clueless at a minimum, because she did not perceive that the reason the Democrats pushed the impeachment of President Trump in January 2021 were the same reasons they pushed for his impeachment in January 2020. It was to get rid of this man that was going to stand in the way and be a roadblock against the Democrats' push toward a Marxist, totalitarian, tyrannical government. Trump stood up for freedom in America, and the American people loved it. And Liz Cheney, as I say, at the very best explanation is that she did not perceive what the Democrats were doing. Worst explanation, that she was okay with it. Either way, she needs to be removed. McCarthy is right to be thinking about it. And I want to talk a little bit about when I say, the agenda of the left and what I mean by what Biden is doing. Just one example. When I tell you the Biden agenda, the Marxist leftist agenda, it is about destruction of the very idea of America. Nothing less. It's about the destruction of the idea of America. Other little points on that. President Biden recently confirmed he will increase the refugee cap, the number of people we take in as refugees every year, from the current level of 15,000 to, he's moving up to 62,500, followed by, in the following year, 125,000. So he's massively increasing the refugee numbers. At the same time, he has completely abandoned the southern border. We have hordes of people flowing in, no idea where they're going, no idea where they go. And we have at the same time the leftist agenda already talked about in the House and Senate of pushing for amnesty. It is staring America right in the face. The Democrat Party saying, we're going to massively increase refugees, we're going to have a massive amnesty program, and we're not enforcing the border. So we're in the range of millions now flooding into their southern borders and doing nothing about it. You can't do those steps and say, oh, but I stand for the sovereignty of America. I believe in the idea of America. They believe in destroying the idea of America, and everyone can see it. And this is why Kevin McCarthy has to remove Liz Cheney. It's why the Republicans, if they want any chance of inspiring voters to get behind them again, have got to say, we are with the Trump agenda, we are with secure borders, we're fine with legal immigration, we can change legal immigration standards, we can increase them, we can decrease them, we can change refugee, but everything is by the law. And everything is going to be done openly, transparently, with debates in Congress, with the American people involved in understanding what their members are doing. But Biden is pushing this, big time, massive new refugee numbers. Similarly, there was if you talk about the kind of where the Republicans sit in Washington right now, and it having to do with this civil war in America, Republicans got away for years with kind of playing along with the Democrats, but running home when they visit their constituents and saying, oh, yeah, I'm right with the Republican agenda. I believe, strong borders, strong national defense, blah, 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 all the talking points, and going right back to Washington. It's Republicans right back to Washington and then capitulating and going along or becoming the Union Party up there. And now, really, another thing Trump's presidency did is awaken millions of Americans to that reality, that the Republicans were never really standing up for the things they said they would. This is what Trump pointed out in his campaign, in his presidency, and to millions of Americans. You never had the Republicans standing up. And so now this reawakened American base, whatever the number is, 80 million Americans who voted for Trump, those people want to see leaders emerge in the party who will do the right thing, who will stand up like Trump did. And so I'll tell you, as examples, people that are at least showing a little bit of backbone here, the House Republicans have announced the NRCC, the National Republican Congressional Committee, which is basically the committee that goes around recruiting candidates to run against incumbent Democrats, so they try to increase the House majority. NRCC Chair Tom Emmer has announced 10 more districts that he thinks that the Republicans can take back in the 2022 midterms. And I want to just say this to him, to NRCC, to the House Chair Tom Emmer. If you don't, as Republicans, start standing up for the Trump agenda, you're not going to win. The American people know, the conservative voters, the GOP voters know, they watched Republicans in Congress for decades go to Washington, concede, capitulate as the country shifted more and more left, more and more big government, more and more dependency on government, more and more massive government programs, more and more government control, slithering and just sliding down the cliff to socialism, to big government control over society. And people got a renewed idea out of President Trump. Wow, we can still rescue America. We can still do it. We can get America back. So this is what this guy, at least he's showing that they're going to go after certain seats. He's named 10 new ones. I could run through them. But anyway, most of them I guess I knew of most of them, but in any case, he's got 10 Democrats he views as potentially vulnerable. He's going to go after and get a good Republican candidate to run against them. And so this is good. This is a little bit a sign of fighting, but I'm telling you, if he does not signal, if those candidates do not signal that we're going with the Trump agenda, and if you don't like calling it Trump agenda, call it the America agenda, the pro-America agenda, the agenda that says we're going to have a strong country, a sovereign country, America the Great, ruled by the rule of law under the Constitution and the Declaration and the very promises of liberty, the Bill of Rights. That's what we're going to run on. Because the American people under Trump finally had their eyes open to how radically un-American today's Democrat Party is. How deeply, not just uncommitted, but how deeply confrontationally the Democrats view every foundational idea of America. They want big government control over your life, your housing, your car, your education, your health care. Everything about your life will be controlled out of Washington if the current Democrat agenda moves forward. And the American people are finally seeing this. One other thing just about the whole, what's happening in Washington and this kind of, I don't even know if I call it a split in the Republican Party. It's kind of like more of an identity crisis. Because most people in Washington who've been elected to Congress, the U.S. House or the Senate, they kind of want to stay there. They like being members of the House. They like being elected officials. So what they really want is re-election. I mean, the two things that they all want, re-election and money. And so what is happening among a lot of the Republicans is, where do we go? Where's the place to settle that's safe? That I'm going to be preserving my seat, preserving my future. And I know this sounds harsh. I actually have several friends, numerous friends, who are members of Congress, and I actually like them. So I'm not speaking, what I'm saying now is not about all Republicans. There are plenty of really good elected Republicans in Congress. The House Freedom Caucus being a massive group of really good representatives in Congress. But we have a lot of people who've gotten their position up there and they want to stay. And they're trying in this identity crisis phase of thinking, now that we're Republicans, but Trump is gone and Biden's in the White House, who are we? What do we stand for? And I'm telling you, if you don't want to call it Trump agenda, call it the American agenda, the pro-America agenda. Get with the basic program that Trump laid out about not just border security. Border security is symbolic of sovereignty, of a sovereign nation committed to the ideas of its founding, of free markets and freedom and a roaring economy flowing from following the basic rules of freedom, of capitalism. You want an America that we stand up in the world and demand that we are treated fairly in our trade deals. We don't submit to international organizations of any kind to which in any degree we must surrender our sovereignty in order to be part. We don't do that. We are America, and we respect the other countries to be their own country with their own ideas, and we meet through international organizations to discuss ideas and find solutions, but they do not involve surrendering American sovereignty, strength, or place in the world. This is what people want to hear out of the Republican Party. And so, speaking of someone who never stands with the Republican Party, I didn't know if you happened to watch this little episode, but Romney, former presidential candidate from 2012, Romney, who is a senator from Utah, he gave a speech at the Utah GOP. Now picture this. This is in his home state. He's one of two senators from this state. He should be like, the grand guru. So he shows up at the Utah GOP convention, and here is how they receive them. I sent Matt a clip. Here you go.
As a person who says what he thinks, and I don't hide the fact that I wasn't a fan of our last president's character issues. And I'm also no fan. Aren't you embarrassed? And I'm also no fan of the president's. Yeah, sure.
My friends, this is the moment I was talking about. Please, thank you, show respect.
Thanks, Derek.
Now I have to tell you, folks, I'm generally speaking opposed to the idea of disrupting public speeches. I think if someone's been invited to speak, you cannot attend, or you cannot clap, but you shouldn't go and boo them because they were invited to speak. And that is the same as college campuses. Let somebody speak. If the leftists want to, complain about it, they can protest outside, they can boycott the speech, but let people speak. It's part of like First Amendment free speech stuff. But what you're hearing out of those people, activists enough to be delegates or at least to be able to attend the Utah GOP convention, you're hearing the outrage at Romney's idiotic, endless, ridiculous attacks on President Trump. I understand that Romney got sideways with President Trump. Trump was not always nice to him. And I don't commend everything Trump ever said. He probably said things that Romney found deeply offensive, and I don't like that either. But what you're hearing out of those people is the same sentiment you hear out of millions of Americans, which is, it's not personal to Trump. I mean, to some degree maybe it is, but it's like the people in Utah, the same as Americans around the country who want the conservative pro-America agenda, you're angry at someone like you are at Liz Cheney, who's willing to fall on their sword and being so proud of attacking President Trump instead of being grateful for somebody who stood up for the ideas of America. Same with Liz Cheney, same with Romney. The American people want to hear the GOP strongly defending Trump, not on a personal level, but on what he did, what he stood for, what he accomplished despite almost zero help from the Republicans in the House and Senate almost all 4 years. What you want to hear, and this is why those people are booing Romney, is not because they personally are sick of fans of President Trump. It's because Trump spoke up for America. And people had their eyes opened to what is happening to America as Trump exposed in his campaign and in his presidency how radically un-American today's Democrat Party is. When you push to abandon the border, when you push for government control over everything coming down the pike right now, coming down the pike out of Congress, control over your housing, where you can live, how you're educated, what your health care is, you realize America's freedom is evaporating right in front of us. Right in front of us. And you have one Republican who is, as every other human being is, imperfect. But President Trump stood up for the idea of America. And if people are livid with people like Mitt Romney, like Liz Cheney, who cannot grasp why people were so fond of Trump. It's not personality. It's not even his tweets, although his tweets helped to communicate because the media would never accurately repeat what he was saying. But there is just a hunger in America, a hunger for a strong Republican Party to say, we're the pro-America agenda, we're the Trump agenda, he's out, but we're on with the agenda. That is the way the NRCC will get those seats flipped. That is the way that Romney can maybe survive the next senatorial, although I don't want him to survive the next senatorial election. I hope somehow in Utah they find someone better to run. Liz Cheney, I think, will be removed by the Republicans, and I don't even think she'll make it back to Congress from Wyoming after this next election cycle. I guess we'll wait and see. Anyway, closing out this segment, I just want to say it's just vitally important to understand the Civil War in America is a war of ideas. It's not a war of pro-Trump and anti-Trump. That's not the war. And the left tries to distract people into thinking the entire political tension in America is all about pro-Trump, anti-Trump. And that's a lie. The political tension in America is between those who love this country, who love the founding freedoms, who love the idea of the Declaration and the Constitution, who want limited government, who want a strong country, who want America the sovereign, who want fairness, they want law and order, they don't want crime on the streets, they don't want riots on the streets, they want America back. That's one side. And where the left lives politically and what they're doing is exactly the opposite of all of that. That is the war in America, and in that place, it's not a physical war, but it is just as consequential as a war with bombs and bullets, because the ideology of the American left is completely off the American playing field, and right now they seem to have all the power in Washington, and they are moving full steam ahead to inflict this agenda on America. And this is why GOP voters around the country, they have no tolerance for Liz Cheney's, nuanceical nitpicking about why she thought this impeachment was okay, and no tolerance for Mitt Romney's, hey, I'm a really swell guy, but, I just hated Trump. No tolerance for it, because they see it as a battle for the future of America, America the free, America America the Marxist. And most people in America still want America the free. That is where we are in this country. And by the way, as one small last little tidbit before I turn to my next story, I have a bunch of stories today, so I better hurry up here. But I told you about yesterday, there was a Saturday in Texas, we had special elections. We had city council and those kind of elections and mayor, but we also had a special election to fill a seat vacated by the death of Congressman Ron Wright and in Congressional District 6. It was just kind of interesting. The person who won, there were 23 people in the race. I told you yesterday, 23 people in the race. It was like, whatever it was, 10, I think 11 Republicans, 10 Democrats, and a Libertarian and something else, whatever it was. Anyway, but the point of it is, the one Democrat who was the biggest vote getter, the woman who, and so it got to where we had the whole big race. We have a jungle primary here, so we get to where we have two winners, top two winners. Now, neither got a majority, so they're having a runoff. Both of the people who get in the runoff are Republicans. So the Democrat, who was the next highest vote getter, named Jana Lynn Sanchez, she made this comment, which is making Nancy Pelosi very nervous. On Saturday, Republican candidates got 62% of the vote to 38% for Democrats. 62 to 38. And the reason, and she's saying basically, to Washington Democrats, you better watch out, because this is not a good sign for the Democrat Party in this country, because this is a very close district. This is not a district already, widely pro-Republican. And she's saying we couldn't carry it there, and you better be thinking about why. Okay, so in that, my very fine friends, we seriously are in the middle of a ideological civil war. I'm on the side of America. I hope you are too, because that is what we are watching, and every single issue we're following moving forward is basically, where we are in terms of holding on to America. Okay, next topic I want to hit very quickly, and that was Luntz and McCarthy are roommates. Okay, this is just kind of amazing. So Frank Luntz, you all seen and heard of him. He's the guy who does all the focus groups, and so he gets people together and he tests them. What's your reaction if we speak? And I actually read in detail several of his things he's done. One had to do when the Obamacare bill was being proposed, and he did a bunch of focus groups, people, allegedly a cross-section representing America, saying essentially, what language kind of triggered people. Are people more upset about it? And I remember, because in that particular case, it came out with the most the way of characterizing Obamacare that most bothered Republicans was calling it government-controlled health care. But the point is, he's been a big name. Republicans turn to him, and all sorts of Republican guru meetings, and the GOP leaders go away, and they have Frank Luntz come and tell them what America cares about, what they really think, blah, blah, blah. So he's kind of a big figure. Turns out, though, he also has relatively left-wing leanings, and includes among his clients Google, that suppresses conservative voices. Google, that is just a monolith of anti-Americanism, anti-conservatism. So in Washington, so Luntz lives there, has a place there, and our own Kevin McCarthy, the minority party, the House minority leader, is Kevin McCarthy from California. Now, I will say, I know people go to Washington to be a member of the House or Senate, and the fact is they have a house in their home district. They, most of them don't sell their home. They still live there, and so they've got, a lot of people cannot go to Washington and afford to buy another house or even a condo. So it's a regular conversation that happens when people go to Washington, especially their first term in Congress. Where are they going to live? Because they cannot even afford the rents there. It's a really tough thing. So that's his excuse. But McCarthy is roommates with Luntz. And I want you to think about that for a moment. When someone first told me this, I said, so what? I mean, that was my answer at first. Well, so what? Because Kevin McCarthy probably is one of those people, doesn't have a ton of money. He's got a room with somebody. At least it's a GOP advisor type. But the fact is, Luntz has been for years shaping and molding conversation and the way people talk about things. Turns out, and this is, Tucker Carlson brought this up, I don't know what, last week, I think. Tucker Carlson talked about it too. Luntz is kind of a leftist. He's okay working with Google. And he lives with Kevin McCarthy. And you just start to get worried about, is Kevin taking wisdom from Luntz? Is Kevin getting, and because I tell you, this larger theme, which is again reflected in the booing that Romney got and the apparent soon-to-be ousting of Liz Cheney, it's hard for people in Washington sometimes to remember or to figure out where the base really is, what they really think. They get caught up in their own self-importance. They're in Washington, they're the ruling elite, and they're kind of the big people, you know? And they go to Washington, they rub shoulders with all the other big elites who got elected to the House and Senate, and they very quickly, in many cases, lose touch with the people. They can't figure out what the people want. I mean, they might go back to their districts and read some speech that a speechmaker wrote for them, but they don't know. They're out of touch. And when you're out of touch with your people, your homies, so you're in Washington and you're rubbing elbows with other ruling elite and often uniparty people, and then you live with Frank Luntz, who is happy to advise Google. I mean, advising Google, if you're in the ballpark of a conservative, if you're in the ballpark of a Republican, you don't humor Google. You don't pretend they're okay. They're a major social media giant, shutting down American political conversation. And Luntz advising on political conversation is okay with them. All I think about the story is I think McCarthy needs to find a new roommate, get away from somebody who would play ball with the left and figure out how much he has been influenced by them. And that is really, to me, why the story matters, why it matters that he's doing that. Anyway, so I guess Luntz got a bunch of in fact, and one example of Luntz, I'll just close and turn to my next topic, but Luntz had a story that I want to just share briefly. So Luntz did a big piece about immigration, and he's trying to advise, how we talk about immigration, how and allegedly helping Republicans or helping whoever hires him and pays him to advise them how should I speak about XYZ. So he did a big thing on immigration, and the messaging that he took away from that, focus group thing he does was that, people in Americans, they love immigrants. They're friendly to immigrants. Americans love immigrants. And so, maybe he came away with, maybe if we say something a little more about the wall or something, maybe that get the Republicans on board. Missing the entire point, the big war, the culture war, the American Civil War that we are in, that the policies of immigration, the policies about refugees, the policies about border security are not just isolated, abstract policy discussions. The left is using weakening the border, refugee policy, and immigration policy as one of its many tactics along the road to destroying America the free. It is one of the vehicles they are using to destroy America the free, is to flood America with people who have no concept of the idea of America, didn't grow up here learning about the idea of America, and can be easily swayed, the Democrats believe, to voting for the party who will say, don't worry, move here, we'll make everything free. The cluelessness of not recognizing that immigration, border, and refugee policy is directly tied to the left's mission to undermine the sovereignty and goodness and greatness and strength of America. If you don't get that, you shouldn't be advising anyone. But Luntz has this group, this focus group, and comes out with, Americans love immigrants. Well, of course, everyone's got their immigrant story. Almost everyone can tell you when, some ancient relative of theirs came here or a last generation relative came here. But that's not the question. The question is not, do we love immigrants? Is that, do we want to have an orderly immigration system, an orderly refugee system, and do we want to insist that people who come here assimilate to America's values? That's the question. He doesn't ask that question, so he comes out with idiotic advice that does not address the concerns Americans have. That's who Frank Luntz is. Kevin McCarthy needs a new roommate. Okay, I want to hit one very quick story, and that is about Zuckerberg and W. Okay, and I have to tell you, this is about George W. Bush, who literally, we live in Dallas. Literally, his library, the George W. Bush Library, is right down the road. I mean, very close. And there were good things about George W. Bush. I honestly, he made me cry on September. It wasn't on September 11th, but a few days later when he went up to the rubble of New York and did his famous speech. I mean, he did many good things. He really did do many good things for America. However, his family, the whole Bush legacy family, the large extended family, has now, in the terms of 2021, and are more eyes opened about globalism, more eyes opened about the globalist agenda, and part of that globalist agenda includes, and it must and necessarily includes, the evisceration of the idea of a sovereign, strong, free America. You can't have the globalist agenda and everybody on the same page and some global entity is more or less kind of controlling everything. You can't have that, the globalist agenda, and have America the sovereign and free and strong. It's one or the other. And so what's happened now, and why I wanted to bring up and just mention this to you, so Mark Zuckerberg, who's a gazillionaire and Facebook CEO, and he, before I forget, in this most recent election cycle, he was the one that put millions of dollars of his own money into certain states and into certain locations within swing states to put in place the mail-in ballot, drop-off centers, all sorts of ways he spent millions of dollars, which appeared to many to be a way to interfere with elections, an outsider interfering with elections, and an outsider very much interfering, pushing toward the leftist, the Democrat victory, the leftist agenda. So Zuckerberg also, as I said, CEO of Facebook, also regularly silencing conservatives, regularly shutting down the conservative message, the conservative talking points, conservative candidates, conservative speakers. I mean, the whole entire social media monstrosity works to silence conservatives. So Zuckerberg is not like a neutral player. He's a leftist, pushing the leftist agenda, pushing leftist victories, and silencing conservatives. So W, our former president, and Zuckerberg partnered up in a new Zuckerberg initiative, which are basically to push for mass immigration, mass migration, and mass amnesty for illegal aliens. And I'm telling you that it is this kind of thing where you want, or that some segment of the conservative side wants to say, well, W probably doesn't see what the agenda is. This is just big-hearted American, really wanting to help the poor in the world, wanting to embrace them into America's culture, just a really, really nice guy and cares about people. I don't think so. I mean, I gave George W. this excuse for a long time, but I think since the time of September 11th, and the time he's watched America, he sat silent for 8 years under Obama, never criticized Obama, when he could see, if he had been paying attention, could see that the Obama agenda was very much the globalist agenda, the ridiculous trade deals with China, the ridiculous submission of America and American sovereignty to international organizations of all kinds, the surrender of America as a country, as a free and strong and noble leader of freedom in the world, to a country just kind of part of the whole globalist mindset. No special place in those people's thinking of America as unique and extraordinary. But Bush is silent about that for 8 years, and critical of Trump in the 4 years he was in office. And now we have a leftist president. Biden's not really in charge. I don't know who's really in charge. I'm going to go with Kamala and Obama, and probably behind it all, George Soros. Some cabal like that's really in charge, because it's not Joe Biden. But whoever it is are very leftist. So George W. Bush, and all the things he could be doing with his life, is partnering up with a guy who has worked to silence conservative voices, shut down political conversation, and aid and abet the radical left, the Democrat Party of today, which is a radical left, tyrannical Marxist party, aided and abetting their victories in elections around the country. And that's who he partners up with for the purpose of pushing mass immigration and mass amnesty. And all I can say, folks, is I guess it's kind of back to my original point of earlier today. The GOP is they have this identity crisis because a lot of them in Washington, the House and Senate, members tried very hard to pretend that Trump wasn't really there for 4 years and to barely help him and to kind of, maybe give lip service, and they went home to their constituents and saying, yeah, Trump. They got back to Washington and would not move in helping him with his agenda. Again, not all Republicans. There are many members of the House Freedom Caucus, some members of the Senate who did stand with the Trump agenda, which was the pro-America, pro-sovereignty agenda. There were some, but many did not. So right now, Kevin McCarthy and the entire Republican leadership of Washington, Mitch McConnell, they're trying to figure and find their place. And what they really want is to go back to where they were before. The uniparty, play along with the Democrats, pretend when you go home you're really conservative, but play along, surrender to the Democrat agenda, and be the ruling uniparty class. That's what they want. But they can't figure out if they can have victories, if they can win, if they do that. They can't figure out how strongly do they have to push the pro-America agenda to keep the voting base with them. So our job as a voting base is to tell them, you have to really, really push. That's the answer. Really, really push the pro-Trump agenda. You have to stop H.R. 1. You have to stop amnesty. You have to stop the court packing. Do everything you can in Washington to stop this totalitarian, tyrannical takeover the Democrats are in the middle of doing. That's the job the Republicans have. And if they will do that, then they will win the 2022 interim elections, the midterm elections. They will win back a lot of things, assuming we can stop electronic election fraud and other fraud. They'll win it back. But if they don't do that, they really are going to be part of Reagan's ash heap of history. One more very quick segment, and then we're going to go to why it matters to you. I just want to mention what this show is doing. Our show, this show, America Can We Talk, is on fire. And when I say upcoming greatness, I don't mean me greatness. I mean what we're doing and who you're going to be hearing from. I will tell you in the closing segment today that why it matters to you. I'm going to again tell you how to join our membership and how to text in your questions. Because what we're doing in this show is I am doing everything I can think of to get the message to the American people that there are, number one, there are thousands of reasons to stand up and fight. We should not be the surrender squad. Because you hear a lot of people on the Republican side say, America's over, it's over, we'll never get America back, the Democrats have taken over everything, and I am telling you that is the worst answer you could possibly tell yourself or anyone else. America is so not over. America, we have to be up for the fight, but it takes patriots everywhere to do things, from the races I told you about in Texas on Saturday, where conservatives took back school boards, they pushed back against critical race theory. We had conservatives pushing and winning. What I try to do in this show is to encourage everyone to keep up the good fight for America, never surrender. I also want to feature for you the many great leaders emerging in this country, strong, conservative, Republican leaders who are emerging, especially women. I love celebrating conservative women, and so I want to just tell you a few upcoming things. Tomorrow on this show, we have Hannah Smith joining us. She is one of the women, one of the candidates who won in this really hard-fought battle in a district very near Dallas, where I am, which was at ISD. This woman, Hannah Smith, is a lawyer. She actually clerked for Justice Alito and Justice Thomas, so she's brilliant besides. But she is going to come and talk about why she is a mom and a lawyer, ran for and won a school board seat. And she did it because you have to stand up against the astonishing, radical, ugly agenda that the critical race theory tried to foist on her school district. She's a hero. And then in our membership thing, which is every Thursday, if you don't know yet, on my show, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, everyone can watch. And I thank all of you who do watch. On Thursdays is our membership thing. And membership, joining America Can We Talk, is very inexpensive. $5 a month, $50 a year. You can join this show and then therefore be part of the live audience on the Thursday shows. And on the Thursday shows, we have an in-studio audience. So if you join America Can We Talk, you can have access to the Thursday shows online, and they're available nowhere else. Live or later, the only people who see these shows are the ones who actually are members on the Thursday shows. This Thursday, 2 days from now, we have Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, or as her staff calls her, MTG. Marjorie Taylor Greene is joining us this Thursday. The following Thursday, we have the chairman of the Arizona GOP, Kelly Ward, Dr. Kelly Ward. She is the chairman of the Arizona GOP. She's going to be in studio with us. She's going to tell us all about the battle to get a fair election count in Arizona. We get great people coming on the Thursday shows. A small price to pay to keep this studio, keep me able to pay for this studio and be on air. I'd love if you become a member. You can do that by going to americacanwetalk.org. And the closing of the show today and the Why It Matters, I'll run through again how you become a member. Very simple. And then how you can submit questions for our special guests on Thursdays. I also had the recent great privilege of getting to know a little bit about a fabulous new PAC that is pushing conservative women and helping conservative women to run. It's therefore put me in touch with a whole slew of the new members of Congress, the new women conservative members of Congress. And we're going to, over the next few months, have numerous of them on telling you why they ran, what it's like, what they're going to be doing, what they're fighting for. This is a country, we are full of fighters. We're full of great American patriots standing up for this country. That's the purpose of my show, is to stand up for this country. And I hope you'll consider joining America Can We Talk and subscribe to our newsletter. The newsletter is free to anyone. Go to our website, americacanwetalk.org. On the homepage, hit subscribe, and it subscribes you. Your email comes to me, gets added to the list, and I send a once-a-week newsletter which has links to everything we've done. You'll enjoy it very much. And that, I guess, is all I have time for today. So I'm going to turn and tell you, as I do at the close of every show, why the stories we talked about today matter to you. So we start our show today on TPUSA. I can't want to even repeat all that again. YWLS. If you or a young woman you know would be interested in attending the Turning Point USA Young Women's Leadership Summit in Dallas, June 10th through 13th, and would like to apply for a scholarship to cover costs, go to parkcitiesrepublicanwomen.com/Missy/Shorey/scholarship. And please think of young women in your life to share this information with. You must be training up the next generation of patriots to keep America strong and free. And we talked about Liz Cheney and America's Civil War. U.S. Rep. Liz Cheney got it when the Democrats first tried to impeach Trump over the false claim of abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. In February 2020, she called out the Democrats for abusing the impeachment power. But she voted to impeach Trump over the January 6th violence at the Capitol, not recognizing or else not caring that it was exactly the same motive Democrats had in this 2021 impeachment as they had in 2020, to destroy Trump and his agenda. Neither impeachment was about Trump's personality or his conduct. Both were motivated by the leftist hatred of the America First message Donald Trump spread and that the American people love. America First is intolerable to today's Democrat Party. America's internal battle at the ideological civil war is about America the free. And on Luntz and McCarthy as roomies, Frank Luntz, a famous GOP message shaper, and Kevin McCarthy, the GOP House Minority Leader, share an apartment in D.C. It is true, apparently. Lots of House and Senate members find D.C. expensive and have to find housing that's not always perfect. But Luntz has been shaping GOP messaging for decades. And Google's. Just think about it. Google's. GOP in D.C. is so out of touch with the GOP base because they do not see the battle in big picture terms. Biden is surrendering the border and tripling refugee intake to weaken America. And Luntz is signaling to the GOP not to worry about it. Kevin McCarthy needs a new roommate. And on W and Zuckerberg colluding, why it matters. George W. is locking arms with Facebook billionaire Mark Zuckerberg on immigration policy, clueless at very best. Debating and discussing and colluding on immigration policy with someone who actively silences conservative online voices and funds massive election interference to help Democrats is not a signal of W understanding what time it is in America. We must see immigration and refugee policy and border policy as part of the broader leftist mission of weakening and ultimately fundamentally transforming America away from sovereignty and freedom. W needs to stick with painting. and on time to join the GOP and why it matters. This week, our Thursday member show will feature U.S. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, or MTG as her staff calls her. And here's how to join. And then I've read these slides several times, so if you're watching this, maybe take a screenshot of this if you can, but our membership plan is very simple. You go to AmericaCanWeTalk.org, choose members on the homepage, choose Join Now, follow the instructions, choose the $5 a month or $50 a year membership plan. Choose your username, your email, and a password you will need. So please choose a password you can remember. America Can We Talk membership gives you online access, online or in person, to our weekly members-only Thursday show every Thursday. And online at America Can We Talk is the only way to watch the Thursday shows live or later, only for members. Offers you opportunity to be part of the Q&A with me or our stellar show guests on Thursdays. Allows you access past members-only Thursday shows in members section of our website. Defrays the expenses of keeping this beautiful studio on air and keeping me on air. Allows us to be free of commercial interruptions. Helps protect conservative voices and views from the growing censorship in America. And then very quickly, how to submit questions. Once you've joined, you can email if you want. If you're a member and you want to send in a question, email me at americacanwetalk@gmail.com. Use the subject line, question for Thursday show guest. So this week, Marjorie Taylor Greene, send me question for Thursday show. And then if you want to ask Marjorie Taylor Greene something, join our America Can We Talk family texting group and text in a question. In the to line of your text, enter 53445, and in the body of the text, type America. You'll then receive our welcome to the ACWT family reply, and you are in. Then, to text me a question, enter 53445 in the to line, and in the text message, type America, and then your question. Don't put any periods or punctuation after America. So your question would look like this: America, do you think we should finish the border wall? It's just one example. You can submit questions ahead of time or live during the show while watching at AmericaCanWeTalk.org. And that, my very fine friends, is America Can We Talk for today. Thank you so much for tuning in every Monday through Thursday to America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America because America matters. And I'll talk to you next time.
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.